Hello and welcome to Talking Schmidt. I'm your host, Eric Schmidt.
Hello, I'm Greg Burmeister.
And today we have the very talented host of the Detoxicity... Wait, oh my God.
You got it right the first time.
Okay, good. Detoxicity podcast, Mike Joseph. Mike, thank you for being here.
What's up, guys?
Thanks for coming.
Doing okay?
I'm doing all right.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here.
No, of course.
So, Mike, we'll talk about the podcast later. We'll close with that as a setup for promoting it. But first, I want to start with your like early life. You're a guest of our. We haven't had many guests who are born in New York.
There are not a lot of us here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, statistically, there are. I mean, there are a lot. But yeah, you're right. It's rare to find one, I guess. So you were born in New York. What year were you born?
I was born in 1976, bicentennial baby.
Oh my gosh, that's so fun.
Cool.
I'm born at like the worst possible time to see a centennial. Like I don't think I'll see the tricentennial. I'll be 90. Yes.
So what are you, like 80?
I was born in 85.
Okay, yeah. You're going to be 91.
Yeah.
When the tricentennial
I'll
hits.
be 92.
But you'll hit 250. I mean, 250's in 2 years.
Oh shit. Okay, well that's pretty
So,
exciting.
Oh, there we go.
What do people call that?
I have no idea.
It doesn't have a fun name like bicentennial or tricentennial.
Those half centennials, those half decades, I don't think they.
I don't think it's
names for
like
those.
bison half tennial.
Yeah.
They're not
sure
giving
how
out
that
awards
works.
for that kind of thing.
No. I mean, I'm sure there'll be like in America 250
Yeah,
thing on TV or something.
Yeah,
like
they'll
that.
Because we might not make it to 300.
I mean,
we might not make it
the
to
way
next
things are
year.
going. Right? Yeah. Seriously.
What month were you born?
I was born on Memorial Day, 1976. So
you
May
did.
of
So you did get to.
I
you
was
were
a month
technically-
old.
Yeah, you were technically around for the bicentennial.
I was around for the bicentennial.
That's one of my favorite, and I wasn't around for it, but that's one of my favorite times in American history. The late 70s, like the music that was out then, the Carter administration music era is one of my favorites. I have a podcast on Spotify called Carter Administration.
Do you really?
Yeah, because you had so much. You had rap starting.
Right.
You had the disco going on. You had a lot of funk music. Also, some of the best rock and roll was coming out at that time. Some of the sleaziest.
Good LSD.
Yeah. Well, that's not. Well, I guess it is kind of music related. But you had like the sleaziest, trashiest rock and roll coming out at that time. You had the beginnings of punk rock music coming out. The B-52s had their like a lot of music people associated with the 80s actually came out.
Started in the 70s.
Yeah,
I grew up, or my early years was a really great era for music for all of the things that
And
you
in New
mentioned.
York especially.
Yeah, I mean, hip hop,
yeah.
disco,
The
Talking
Ramones.
Heads, Blondie,
Yeah,
all of that
yeah.
stuff.
CBGB stuff, yeah.
The
It was
hair
all-
metal was kind of started in the late 70s
Yeah.
too, with
Yeah.
like Kiss and
Yeah.
Well, and I was talking about this last night. What's that fucking band? David Lee Roth.
Van Halen.
Van Halen. Yes.
yeah, exactly.
Van Halen, like they had a couple albums in the 70s.
They did,
Yeah, and then
First
they
album came out in
influenced
78.
like Motley Crue and all those other
Right.
types of like glam rock bands.
Yeah. Okay, so we've established, we've set the soundtrack for
Mike's-
like your first 4
When the
years of
biopic
life.
comes out, you are going to know what music to play. 100%.
We already know the soundtrack.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so you were born in New York. What neighborhood were you born in?
I was born in Bushwick, actually, on
hospital, or
Hancock
that's-
Street. I was born at...
The Wyckoff Heights.
I don't know what they call it. Every neighborhood has a completely different name now than it did 40 years ago.
We're creating micro neighborhoods,
I-
which I think is
yeah.
okay. It creates a sense of community,
It's
right?
fine, but when people ask me where I live now, there are like 5 different names for it.
Yeah.
It's
Do you
like
wanna-
Dimmers Park, Flatbush, Kensington, just Flatbush, which is how I know it.
Sometimes people get lazy and just name it after like the stop it's near,
Right.
Which is
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
Right. You're like, all right, that's just a neighborhood now, I guess.
Right. But yeah, I was born at Maimonides Hospital, Maimonides, whatever the fuck you call it. I don't know
I
exactly.
thought you were saying I was born at my mommy's hospital. I was like,
That would be pretty dope.
Yeah,
yeah.
sure, I was born at my mommy's hospital too, but
Yeah.
it had a different name. It had like a more official name than my mommy's hospital.
But I was also a super preemie. Was
okay.
born early and was in ICU or something related to that for a long time. So I got transferred to Bellevue, and I was there for a while.
Bellevue, Manhattan.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're how premature?
I was 3 months premature. I was supposed to be a September baby.
You really wanted to see that bicentennial.
It was calling my name. I was like, but America's turning 200.
I gotta be here
Get
for
me
this.
out of here.
Yes, exactly.
I must see these. I mean, they probably had some great bands play at the thing. You know, your love for music.
1976. Who played the bicentennial? That's something to look up.
If I had to get, well, I mean, that's interesting because like Carter wasn't president yet.
Nah. It was an election year.
Yeah.
So Ford was still president.
Ford was still president, so that he probably didn't get a lot of great bands to play for
Carpenters.
Yeah, right. The
yeah.
Carpenters. Noted Republicans, the Carpenters. No, but like, you know, Republicans usually have a hard time finding acts to play their little shindigs.
I'm
you know,
well aware.
Yeah. So like Carter had like, you know, the Allman Brothers and Willie Nelson were big like they like toured on his behalf.
Okay.
And arguably got him elected, but that's a history lesson for another time.
Kid Rock wasn't around.
Oh, God. Thank God.
Not a big Carter fan either, I would imagine. Okay, so you're born. You grow up in which neighborhood?
East Flatbush.
East Flatbush.
Yeah.
What was that? What was that neighborhood like at that time?
It wasn't the world's safest, most progressive, most the richest neighborhood in the world. It was, you know, like
when you say, and by the way, like I don't know the difference between East Flatbush and like is there just a regular Flatbush?
There's regular Flatbush, which is
Okay.
kind of the neighborhood I live in now.
Okay.
Which is also called Ditmas Park. But East Flatbush is basically anything east of Flatbush Avenue.
Gotcha.
So it was, you know, growing up in the 80s, early 90s, it was...
Not as cool as the music videos made it seem.
I mean, I don't even know if the music videos made it seem particularly cool. Like if you,
Oh yeah, I guess you're right. Well, Bad. What neighborhood is he going to in Bad?
Oh, I think that was... I actually think the video for Bad was shot at like the Hoyt Skimmerhorn station, which is
Oh,
sort
that's
of
more like Dumbo-ish, kind of
like downtown Brooklyn area, which was also not great in 1987 at all. Like nowhere in Brooklyn except for maybe Park Slope.
Yeah, you see a video. So do you remember like the graffiti inside of the subways
Absolutely.
era?
Absolutely.
I've lived in New York since 2009. I mean, like other than like a few drawings, sometimes it's not at all what you used to see. I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
when you see it in movies and everything.
Yeah. Or just old pictures. Like old
yeah.
pictures. It's so funny too. They'll be like, New York was so dangerous back then, and it's just like a picture of like Meryl Streep smiling on the fucking subway. I mean, sure, there's a ton of graffiti behind her, but it's like she looks fine. She's wearing a sundress, whatever.
Yeah, no, I recently watched The Taking of Pelham 123 with a friend of mine. The OG version, the 1973 or whatever. And he didn't grow up here, and also is also significantly younger than I am. And it was just like, was it really like that? And I remember, you know, in the early 80s, at least mid 80s, the subways being completely like tagged up with graffiti and all that stuff before they changed, you know, they cracked down, and B, I think they changed the material on the outside of subway trains so that they wouldn't get...
it like repelled the paint or whatever.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Do you remember it being like significantly more dangerous on the subway when you were growing up? Yeah.
I mean, I've seen people pull guns out on the subway.
Oh, shit. Like back then?
Yeah. I mean, when I was in high school...
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, kids would walk through the subway, like, in between the cars, walk through and, like, rob people on the train. Like, there were no cell phones, you know, none of that stuff, so you couldn't capture anything
a lot
as
easier
it
to
was
get away
happening.
with that. Yeah.
So you've seen the city become significantly safer, I guess, over
100%.
the years. What do you think, what do you think that is? What do you think, like, caused that? There's obviously, like, a lot of theories about that, like lead in gasoline, you know, that like
Sure.
don't have
Microplastics.
Basically, I do think that, you know, when Giuliani came in 94, that's when things sort of started to become a little bit more Disney-fied. And they really started to bring more money into the city and, you know, invest in certain things to kind of clean the city up, some of which are not great in retrospect.
Right.
But I
also,
think that
there was a national change happening too. It wasn't like, you know, there was crime has been going down since then nationally.
Right. I also think a large part of that is technology.
Sure.
Like no one's going to beat the shit out of you if someone next to you was going to record it on their phone and like, you know,
that's true.
So we're self-surveilling.
Yeah.
In addition to there being like, you know, in the Bloomberg era, there was just a lot of surveillance, just, you know, cameras
general
surveillance.
surveillance. I mean, cameras everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, so you grew up there in Flatbush, and where'd you go to high school? What high school?
I went to Brooklyn Technical High School.
Is that what kind of school is that?
It is one of the handful, I think, well, there were 4 when I was growing up, specialized high schools in New York City that you had to take a test to get in. And they were all specialized math and science high schools. There were actually 3 when I was a teenager. There was Brooklyn Tech, there was Bronx High School of Science, and there was Stuyvesant in Manhattan. So those were the 3 sort of like nerdy schools. I don't know if you guys, you might be a little bit young, the TV show Head of the Class.
I don't remember that one.
Okay. I'm trying to think of famous people that were on that show, like Robin Givens. And the Nickelodeon guy, Dan Schneider, who did all that. He was on that show.
He created all the Nickelodeon shows.
Yeah, he was on that show.
So don't go watch it, folks.
Yeah, don't it's a hard rewatch, but that show was about a bunch of brainy kids in a class, and it was based on the high school that I went to.
Okay. Did you have were you super into math and science at that time, or?
I mean, very briefly. I think once I got to high school, I was like, this math and science shit sucks. Like, why did I do this?
Math more than science, I think.
Yeah,
right?
I am, as an adult, 100% not I mean, a lot of the math stuff I've retained. So,
sure.
You know,
I mean, there's certain math you do use every day.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, there's definitely a muscle memory there.
Yeah.
But anything related to science, like, I have no concept. It sucks.
So I worked in accounting for a few years for like TV and film, and I still use my calculator to calculate a 20% tip at restaurants, you know. And my wife is like, "What the fuck? You should be good enough at math to do this in your head." I'm like, when you work as an accountant, though, you always use a calculator because you always have to show your work, and it's not only is it a calculator, it's one of those one with like a fucking printer on it.
It's like a little baby cash register.
Yeah.
Printing.
Yeah, it's a show your work.
Yeah,
calculator.
so I'm like,
wow.
That's what I learned as an accountant, is to always check and have proof, you know.
And you're using this in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I was using it in 2016. I think was when I was.
That's still pretty late.
Oh yeah, I mean they still do it. Like you know, that's industry standard. You know, is to show your work, so like someone else doesn't have to bust out a calculator to make sure you got it right. You have a printed, you know, thing of what you did.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yes, accounting.
Just
so
running from topic to topic.
Yeah. So you ditched math and science, and you start. When did you start getting interested in music?
I've always been interested in music since I was a baby. I've been interested in music my entire life. I think the math and science thing was a way for. I mean, when I was a kid, I was interested in it, but also it was a way for my folks to like steer me towards a practical job. They were like, "We want you to be a doctor or a lawyer." Like, I don't know what I wanted to be when I was a kid, but I wanted music to be somewhere.
I love how parents assume those are like easily attainable jobs,
right?
Too,
Yeah.
you know,
right.
like you're like I want to be a rock star. They're like, no, it'd be something easier, like a doctor. Like, well, that's come on, man. Like that's also fucking
Just
insanely
go blast
hard.
through med school.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
These are not easy things to do, man.
They're not.
So did you grow up like having MTV in the house or no?
We did not have cable. Or actually, I did not have cable until I was living on my own. So I didn't have cable until I was almost after 18.
Okay.
And
how were you getting like records?
I mean, records. There were music video shows on like network TV. There was Friday Night Videos.
Okay.
There were a bunch of like local. Actually, there's a public access show called Video Music Box that's on Channel 31 here in New York. That started in 1984 and is still on the air today.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Wait, 40 years later.
Which borough's public access is that?
I think it goes to all boroughs plus like New Jersey.
Wow. Well, that's cool.
But there was a documentary on Video Music Box maybe a year or two ago produced by Nas, and just every kid who was into hip hop in New York City in like the late 80s and early 90s, like you ran home from school and you turned on Video Music Box at 3:30 on Channel 31.
Shit, that's great. Well,
Yeah.
I didn't know we would be plugging another show today, but that's pretty cool. I don't normally take notes during a recording of a podcast, but I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I got to remember this.
I'll remind you.
Definitely want to check this out.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I got to write it down, but I'm like, I'm literally recording this.
Yeah.
I can go back and remember what the fuck to check out.
This guy I used to work with, Caleb, for quite a while, he was Nas's personal videographer. So he would tour with Nas and like video like all the behind the scenes stuff, and I thought that was an amazing job.
Yeah.
It's not a bad gig.
Yeah.
And back to what you were talking about, I didn't realize, you grow up in America and you're like, yeah, MTV, it's always been there, And I was talking to my friends who are from the UK, and like they're like, we didn't we got MTV eventually, but like it wasn't always. And like what you're talking about is like BBC would just have like a time slot where they would just play music videos, because they were making music videos even before MTV.
Yeah, 100%.
So there were shows on TV before MTV where they were playing music videos.
Yeah, I mean, A, we couldn't afford cable. B, our neighborhood wasn't wired for MTV until I think maybe the late 80s, something like
What do you
that.
mean wired for MTV?
Like there were parts of New York City that could not get MTV, like at the height of like the Michael Jackson 1983, 1984.
Holy shit.
Not all of New York City could get MTV. Like,
wow.
it wasn't all wired.
That probably was the biggest scandal in the world at the time.
I mean, I don't know that MTV was necessarily even that, like, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
But, growing up where I grew up, like, nobody gave a shit about MTV. I mean, most people didn't have it.
Right.
But there was also, like, BET, Black Entertainment Television, which played videos. There were definitely other ways to consume.
So the BET existed back
It existed,
then.
yes.
Do they predate MTV?
They, I think, by a couple of months.
Holy shit!
Yeah,
man,
interesting.
This history has been whitewashed. Man, what the fuck? Like MTV gets all the fucking hoopla, but goddamn, BET was around before. I can't believe this. Shocking revelations here.
That's not 100% fact. Like someone would have to fact check.
Oh, don't
me on
worry,
that.
we don't fact check.
Okay.
No, we're just gonna let that stand.
It's set in
I'll
stone
take
now.
Yeah. So you get into music. You're around. What kind of records were in the house at that time?
A fairly diverse array of stuff. I think
I've seen your personal record collection, and it's very diverse.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a lot of R&B and funk and like early days hip hop, some Curtis Blow and like that kind of stuff.
Nice.
And then, my family is of Caribbean and Latin descent. So there was like salsa music, like Celia Cruz. There was reggae, there was Bob Marley. And then, they'd throw in like there'd be a Pat Benatar somewhere in there as well. Or, I had a neighbor in my neighborhood who was really, really into like the Police.
Dude. Love those records.
Yeah.
Those early, yeah.
I mean,
oh my God.
Zenyatta Mandata is like a formative record for me from when I was a little kid. And he was so into the Police that he named his dog Sting.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Funny story about Sting. I was walking through Central Park one time, and this guy walked up to me, and he was like a stranger. He was like, "You missed it," and I was like, "What?" And he was like, "You missed it." And I was like,
okay.
I was like, what? Well, then I got curious. Like, what did I miss? And he said, Sting just rode by on a bike. And I was like, why? Yeah, I was like, why do I look like I would care about that at all? Also, if I do look like that big of a Sting fan, why would you ruin my fucking day by telling me
this
that?
close.
Yeah. I think that would have been the funniest time in my life to kill myself in front of that guy. You missed it, Sting, and I'm just like,
all right, well,
just walk in front of a bus.
This is the end, I guess.
I'll never have this opportunity
again. Right, yeah. Sting will never be here ever again.
I hope to see Sting at some point, I guess. So you end up working at record stores in high school?
After I graduated high school, and 3 months later, I was working in a record store.
Okay, where? Which one? Like, what were the big record stores back then?
So back then in New York City, there were pretty much 3 big like record store chains. There was HMV, which had like 3 or 4 locations all in Manhattan. There was Nobody Beats the Wiz, which if you are a Seinfeld fan, you've seen like ads for that, and when they're going to like basketball games or baseball games or whatever.
Nobody Beats the Wiz.
Yeah, but that was like a precursor to Best Buy and Circuit City. It was a store that sold electronics and music, which I also worked at for 7 years. And then there was Tower Records.
Yeah, I know Tower. I've heard of Tower.
Yeah.
Which I worked at 2 different locations, but my first job out of high school was working at Tower Records on 3rd between 86th and 87th on the Upper East Side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What years was this?
This was, I worked for Tower from 1993 to 1996.
Okay. Okay years for music, I think. It was before things got really bad in the late 90s.
I mean, it was a great time for like hip hop You know, Biggie's first album came out, Nas's first album came out, Wu-Tang's first album came out. It was also like, you know, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, whole Soundgarden,
grunge,
Stone Temple Pilots,
scene.
like all of that stuff.
Right.
So yeah, it was a pretty good time for music.
Cool. Any like interactions with musicians at that store, at those stores when you were working at the record stores? Like,
pretty constantly.
because I guess a lot of them live on the Upper East Side, and then you worked on the Upper West Side as
and then,
well.
I worked. There was
Sting
one.
lives, you know.
Is that where he lives? I don't know.
Yeah,
He's always biking.
I know. I don't think he bikes very far. He's
I
probably
missed it.
Yeah, you missed it too.
Damn it.
We're both. You never saw Sting either.
I have never met Sting. But
Fingers crossed.
the second Tower Records I worked at was on 66th and Broadway. And
right over by
it was
the
right
Beacon.
Right by the Beacon,
and
right by Lincoln Center.
Yeah.
And ABC's studios were, maybe still are, I'm not sure.
I think there's there, yeah.
In that area.
I had a temp job at ABC Studios when I first moved out here in 2011, and it was right there.
Yeah, I think I saw Regis walking around. His show was on ABC, right?
Yeah. I was going to say, anytime somebody did Regis and Kathy Lee or one of those like morning shows.
What a throwback. Period called Regis and Kathy Lee. I haven't heard that since since then.
That's
what the
90s.
era we're talking about.
But they would come and, shop or look for, if they had a record out, they would look to make sure that Tower Records had their record in stock.
Yeah.
And then some folks just lived in the area. So I either helped or rang up or whatever, like a bunch of, Rosie O'Donnell, Patty Davis.
Oh, yeah, because she had her show right over there, right? Rosie was on, or no, she was on Fox.
ABC. No, she was on ABC.
She was on ABC,
Yeah.
okay.
Paul Simon.
Wow.
All of a sudden I'm drawing blanks. Elton John, like all these different, Heavy D, all these different people with Tony Bennett would come through. And
Oh, wow.
Tony fucking Bennett.
Yeah.
And what are they buying their own records, or what's happening?
The only person that I can ever recall buying their own record was Tupac.
Whoa.
Man, I didn't know there was going to be a Tupac story, and I certainly didn't think it was going to be that he was buying his own record. He seems way cooler than buying his own fucking record.
I bought my own record at Best Buy one time.
That's fair. Somebody's got to support you. You know what I'm saying? If I had a record out, I'd be the first dude in the store like, hey, this is my record. Buy it.
How can you expect others to support you if you can't
support yourself?
And the cashier did not care. I was like,
this is me.
Yeah, I was like, you should check this out. And they were like $20.
Was that your only interaction with Tupac?
It was my only interaction with him.
Because he was born in New York, right?
Yeah, he wasn't living in New York at the time. I think he was actually on trial in New York at that time.
Oh, wow.
And he came in and he bought his own CD single.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What could this story possibly be there? Like, what? Like, I know you can get
maybe
it.
The label was just like, fuck you, I'm not giving you your own CD single, so you got to go and buy it, see what this shit sounds like.
I know you had an interaction with Prince at some point. Was that a record store interaction? What was that?
That was a record store interaction. So one of the first artist events, because you're a record store, they do signings and all sorts of stuff. One of the first in stores that I was a part of was Prince, who was then not Prince. He was the artist formerly known as Prince. And this was maybe June or July of 1994. I just turned 18. It wasn't at my home store. It was the Tower Records on 4th and Broadway, which was the huge flagship store, gigantic place, took up the whole block, whatever. And I begged my coworkers. I was like, let me work there for a day because I really, really want to meet Prince. And they let me do it. I brought my cousin, she's 2 years, so I guess she was 16 at the time. We get there, there are lines all over the place, going around the block. Everybody's freaking out. We get in at some point, whatever's happening. They bring the employees up to the front. We pass him. He nods at me. Which is, I'm like, this dude's not even going to make eye contact, whatever. He nodded at me and sort of half smiled, I guess, a little bit, which was cool. And then he starts a conversation with my very pretty 16-year-old cousin. Now, obviously, he didn't know how old she was. But I'm like, oh, if I'm a pretty girl, I can, have a conversation with Prince? This is messed up. But, they had a brief, exchange of words. And then as we were leaving, and this is really the only time I've ever seen this, there was a woman sort of splayed out in the entryway, hysterical, just crying, completely going nuts. And, prior to that and even after that, like I've only seen reactions to famous people like that and like on TV. Where they're doing like little hype B-roll stuff. When
like when the Beatles played.
Beatlemania
stuff. In front of me, this woman was like losing her marbles because Prince was sitting at a table like 5 feet away, really not paying any attention to her whatsoever, but just to like be in his presence.
She just got her going, man.
Yeah, she, yes, it was really weird because they were like, hysterical.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's very tragic that he's no longer with us to get 100%. to get women that excited.
Yeah, that's why.
Oh, you got the symbol when you went by the symbol.
Yes. Yeah, he used to. When I lived in Minneapolis, my friend worked at a bar, and it was downtown Minneapolis, and every Sunday night, this cover band played called Dr. Mambo's Combo, and Michael Bland, who drummed for Prince, was in the cover band, and once in a while, Prince would show up, and he'd walk in, he'd sit in this corner by himself for like a few minutes. He'd watch a song or two and then just leave. And it was so funny. Like nobody really acknowledged him. He would just show up and leave.
Just picture there being like a cloud of smoke and all of a sudden like he materializes.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that, when it's if they're not like in a big city, if they're not from a big city, I should say, because I know people who like see Bruce Springsteen around. Like
I've met Bruce.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. But like in the area that he lives, like no one makes that big of a deal when he turns up somewhere, because it's where he lives. You're likely to see.
Yeah,
him.
that's how it was with Prince in Minneapolis. It's not like you're not expecting to see him as if you would in like New York or LA.
Right. What was the Bruce story?
He came to Tower Records wanting to buy Laserdiscs.
Did he buy one of Tupac's? Or
I mean, it's entirely possible. I don't know if Tupac had any Laserdiscs at that. I mean, I guess maybe his movies would have been out on Laserdisc. Yeah.
Multi-talented guy,
Yes.
A double threat at least.
Star of film and music. Yes.
So when did you start like working in the music industry? Well, I mean, obviously, like working at a record store. But when did you start? What was your next level up? I guess?
Yeah, I did retail from '93 to '03. And then kind of moved into like some back end retail stuff. I was buying and doing that kind of thing. I did that for 2 years. And then in 2005, I sort of moved into like the industry part of the music industry.
And what was your start?
I was working as an assistant at a Actually, I still work for the same company 19 and a half years later. But I started off as, kind of an admin assistant. And was working with the VPs of sales.
Okay.
This is, very early iTunes days, so everything was still CD-based. And, have just sort of like done different things throughout the last 20 years. I've done PR. I've sold merch. I've done.
You wrote reviews, right?
I've written reviews. I've done all sorts of stuff.
When I was a kid, my mom worked for the Tampa Tribune in Florida. She was an editor there, and she would ask me to review CDs like for free, I think, which is fucked up. Child labor.
I mean, it's child labor.
But
Don't condone it.
I was in like 4th grade, but I just thought it was like I got the CD for free, But it was always the shittiest stuff that like the real reviewers didn't want to do. So like we let this 4th grader review this one, and it was like the Looney Tunes sing Elvis, I think was one of them. And I wrote I was like, this is terrible. This is very bad. This is very bad. This should not have been made. And my mom was like. Because she was my editor too. She was like, "There's no way it's that bad." And then she listened to it. She was like, "My God, you're right. This is an accurate review."
And you were the target demographic,
right?
I was like, "This is fucking bad." And then, but I did get a review of Jock Jam CD.
Hell yeah!
And I loved those fucking things. Yeah. Man. I was on top of the world with that shit. I was like, "This is the greatest album of all time."
You're unbelievable.
Do you think ESPN was like this? Reviewer said we're the greatest album
Put it
of
on
all
the back
time.
of the next CD.
Better than Abbey Road.
Right.
Shit fucking rules.
And if people under 35 are watching or listening to this have no concept of what Jock Jams is,
just do yourself a favor, buy yourself a Jock Jam CD.
You can go to any record store, used record store, and probably get them for like $1.99.
Oh, for sure, 100%. Or like you can find them on eBay probably too. But yeah, I love those things back then. I don't listen to as much Jock Jams now. I've
tapered off.
I can solidly say my Jock Jams interest has
declined steadily.
It plateaued in like '96 and has been steadily on a decline.
It's still there. It's just significant.
Every now and then you need a little jock jam to
I
push it up a little
dust it
bit.
off every once in a while. Every summer I get into my jock jams era,
Get your fist pumping motion happening.
Who are some of your favorite people that you've worked with in the industry? Did you meet jock jams?
Sir Jock Jam.
Right? Are you Mr. Jock Jams?
Please,
You're
Mr. Jock
great.
Jams was my father. You can call me Jock Jams.
I'm thinking about this now, and there are some bands that I've discovered through work that have gotten significantly more popular over the years that I am really happy to say that I was somewhat there at the outset, like, worked with Childish Gambino at the beginning of his career.
Oh, cool.
There's a band called Dawes that I love very much.
Yeah, I remember Dawes.
I've met Taylor Goldsmith a bunch of times and just sort of being there at like the beginning of their story and seeing, although I guess he's more famous now for being married to Mandy Moore.
Well, I think when your pause, there was a weighted pause there. You said Taylor, and I imagine everyone listening was like,
"Oh no, I've never worked with Taylor Swift before in my entire life."
I meant Hanson.
That one.
Who's Taylor Swift?
Right. Could have been James Taylor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. What a unique way to discover music, working within it.
I mean, there are tons of bands that I don't know that I would have paid a third look to if it wasn't for the fact that they kind of crossed my desk at some point.
Yeah. Who are some of your least favorite that you worked with?
To be perfectly honest with you, in like a 30-year career, I have had very few negative interactions with musicians.
That's good.
I will say that the one time that I really felt like I was shit on by a musician, and this isn't somebody that I looked up to either, a certain metal legend that is very famous for getting punched in the face on video.
Axl Rose.
Not that guy.
I was gonna say, is it Andrew WK?
No, it is a.
Well, good, because like Andrew WK has always been a sweetheart to me and Greg. So,
Yes.
Like I was so scared for a second. I was like, "Are you about? Is this? Are we about?"
He's emailed me and he signs his emails "Love Andrew."
Oh, so Andrew WK seems like a hell of a guy. This is a person. I'm not going to give his name away. His band has his last name, and it rhymes with Franzig.
Damn. Glenn.
Yes.
I've heard negative things about him before.
He seems angry.
Not the nicest guy in the world.
Greg knows one of the other guys from that band.
I don't know any other guys from that band.
Jerry only.
Yeah, I think he's I think he's the only other. Like, I think he's the second most famous name associated. with
Jerry's
the
my boy.
Misfits.
Yeah.
right.
I'll probably see him actually at the end of next month.
Okay.
Greg does
Do you know
Halloween
your
with
boss
him.
is has a really bad attitude sometimes.
It's almost the spooky season, so like it's Misfits time of
that
year.
is correct.
It's Misfits, Cramps.
That is correct.
We're getting into it.
Yeah, it's funny. I go to my friend has a Halloween party every year because her birthday is a couple days before Halloween, and Jerry only shows up sometimes, and he's in his full Misfits garb, and it's like it's funny because it's Halloween, but that's just what he wears.
That's what he wears, right? Yeah.
He drives a hearse,
Yeah,
Does he really drive a hearse?
he does have access to a hearse. It might be like his cousins or something. It's parked.
So
in
yes,
New
he drives
Jersey,
a
but
hearse.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Are you as sad as Greg and I about the Dave Grohl situation?
I'm not.
Our hearts.
Yeah, I feel like I wasn't even surprised by it. You know,
Right.
it's
Really?
like, he's a rock star, that's what happens.
That's my theory. I've been kind of looking at this, not particularly directly. Like, honestly, I don't really give a shit about Dave Grohl beyond the music that he makes.
Yeah.
And what he does with his personal life is what he does with his personal life. But reading between the lines, I'm like, okay, so this guy had a kid outside of his marriage, which absolutely party foul. Like, don't do that.
Party foul, yeah.
Not recommended.
Potential legal foul as
Right.
well, by the way.
Right. Although it does seem like he got in front of it and he's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to take care of this kid. Like, this kid's going to be a part of my life, whatever. Like, when you fuck up, you do the noble thing. And I think he's doing the noble thing.
Right.
I find it interesting that he didn't really apologize for cheating on his wife.
Right. Yeah. The wording was kind of odd.
Right,
Yeah.
which makes me believe that he and his wife have an open relationship, which I'm fully in support of. I think
To
most
each their
relationships,
own.
Yeah, sure.
I think monogamy is kind of a silly concept, but I think that, they have an open relationship, and the ground rules were, hey, date, sleep with whoever you want, just don't get somebody else pregnant because that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
And he messed up and got somebody pregnant. And, again, I respect him getting out in front of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why it's like a huge news story because rock star gets another girl pregnant. That's like, okay, it's Sunday.
Well,
Exactly. I was not surprised by that at all.
I think what makes it a unique story is that he had an image of being a very good guy. So I think it's like,
He can still be a good guy. He's just a good guy who made a mistake.
dog bites man doesn't get headlines.
Right.
Man, but like when you have something I think it's just kind of an unusual situation.
Sure.
I think that's the reason.
If it was like Gene Simmons or something.
Right. You're like, oh, yeah.
If it was someone we knew was an asshole, it wouldn't make headlines.
So it's not the thing that he did. It's the fact that he's the person that did it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, and this may just have been music industry marketing doing well for a very long time for him that just finally crumbled. But yeah, he was always known as like, just like he's like the good guy, he's always very nice and everything. I read his book. It kind of sucked.
I also read his book.
Yeah. Well, like all those rocker books, like a lot of musician books, by the end, it just gets boring. It's the same story. Like, and I got married and I got some kids and I love my kids.
Settled
and like,
down
it's
right.
like, all right, lame-o, like go back to doing drugs or something.
Right.
Yeah, go snort some ants.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
Well, that's the one that didn't, like The Dirt. Like, never, did you ever read The Dirt?
Yes, I've read The Dirt.
I got it right there below my TV.
The Dirt never gets boring. You're just like, oh my god, these guys are It's like if wild animals learned how to write a book. That's what that book is. You're just like, what the fuck is
Close
this
enough.
shit? Yeah.
I also saw the movie The Dirt.
I haven't seen the movie. Is it any
I
good?
watched that right when it came out.
It's all right.
Yeah.
Pete Davidson's in it.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so that's kind of much more recent, I guess, than I thought it would
The
be.
last
couple
2019.
years ago. Yeah,
it was like
something
right
like that.
pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
Before we leave the music section of the podcast, was there any other thing you wanted to say about any run-ins with anyone in the music industry that you wanted to say?
And the Prince one is the story that I always like to tell. Just because who crosses paths with Prince ever?
Prince is such an interesting, and this will segue nicely into us talking about your podcast, I think. We'll see. Who knows? But so Prince is an interesting case study, right? Because here you have a guy who dressed and looked kind of, androgynous, I think you could probably say. And was one of the most prolific lady fuckers of all time, probably. And was just so massively popular. And yet you have people with no sense of history, no memory now who are like, didn't used to be men, men were men, and it's like, no, man. What the fuck are you talking about?
I'm from the 80s. Not only was there Prince, but there was Boy George. There was an actual man who dressed up in what was presumed to be women's clothing.
When was the last time you watched any Boy George music videos, by the way?
It's been a minute.
So I made an 80s music video playlist. Hugely problematic videos. So the Karma Chameleon video is set in slave times for some reason. That is true. And it's just why did you choose this?
Yeah.
You could have chosen any other time. And it's Louisiana and it's 18 whatever the fuck. You're just like, no, don't do this, Boy George. And then Do You Really Want to Hurt Me?
There's blackface in that video.
Blackface in that. Yeah. What are you doing, Boy George?
There's blackface in that video.
What the fuck is this? Did they not have a black person working for them?
There was a black person in Culture Club.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. How did no one be like, hey, maybe, no, I'm not really sure about this artistic direction.
Because it was 1982 and people didn't necessarily think about shit like that back then.
And it's not even this is not an overly woke thing to say, I don't think. It's just why though? Why are you going this direction? This seems like an odd direct. The song isn't about any of this. Why are we doing this?
There are so many things though you can look from that era and even more recent eras you can look back on and we shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, did you ever read Keith Richards' book?
I don't think I did. I think I had it at one point. Never.
Well, obviously, they've done interviews about the song "Brown Sugar."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And they're all like, Yeah, we wouldn't have done that now. We kind of regret doing it then. The imagery, like we were going for an imagery thing. We were in Alabama, and it's about heroin, but we did this weird imagery thing, and just not a thing we would repeat.
That's fair.
Yeah, but it's just like what the. Also, I think cocaine probably.
I think cocaine probably has a lot to do with a lot of that shit.
Just terrible decisions in art. You know, maybe. I mean, can we think of any good decisions in art that came from cocaine?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't. I mean,
there are lots of good songs about cocaine.
Sure, yeah. All right, well, that's good. Good. Glad we can put an asterisk or a pin on that one. All right, so your podcast, Detoxicity. Tell us a little bit about it.
It's really a podcast about. It's a podcast about masculinity and what that means in 2024. And in each episode, I interview somebody and we just talk about their life experience. I try to pick people who have interesting life stories. Although I think everybody, if they allow themselves to be critical enough and allow themselves to be comfortable enough, everybody has an interesting life story.
Sure, yeah. I would argue that that's a big part of this podcast as well, too.
So it's really just talking to people about the things that they experience, the things that they go through, and really providing a narrative that is not the whole, the party line about what a guy is supposed to be like. You got to be super butch and you got to hide your feelings and you can't be, you can't cry, you can't be confused about things, all that stuff. It's just sort of combating the
alpha male.
Yeah.
It's combating
an alpha male wouldn't use the word butch.
Fair. I mean, most straight people wouldn't use the word butch.
No, most butch people, we wouldn't use the word butch.
But just, combating that popular narrative, which has proven to be so destructive, not just to men, but to people of all genders.
Sure, yeah. It's a very outward, outwardly negative thing.
Yeah, I mean, patriarchy doesn't just affect men, and it doesn't just affect non-men. It affects everybody.
Right. I remember when I was on your podcast, we talked about there was just a thing that I said, or a thing I tried to explore on the podcast that I kind of wanted to amend a little bit.
Okay.
I think I said that people or men now are worse than they were in the past. Men of the 50s and 60s were better or something. But what I mean by that is men nowadays, I feel like. Or they're not all men, obviously, but a lot of men try too hard. And I feel like that wasn't, you just either were away or you weren't away back then. And now I feel like you have this hyper masculinity of just trying too hard. And every single person I know every man I know who's a big fan of Donald Trump, they have that. They have that I gotta prove. They have some flaw in
overcompensation.
They have some flaw that is causing them to feel the need to be hyper masculine in a way that's just kind of unnatural.
Yeah.
You're this is, you don't have to do this.
Yeah, it's bro, you don't have to try so hard.
There's some insecurity that is causing this.
100%.
Yeah, so that I was obviously men were terrible in the 50s and 60s.
Yes, they were.
But it's a different thing now. I feel like you didn't really have that as much. There wasn't a I gotta prove. You just were or you weren't. You were at your level that you were at. You were either toxic or not. But now it's an attempt. It's an intentional attempt to be very toxic and to prove yourself.
I agree.
Okay, good. All right. Glad we got that.
I don't remember the conversation that.
Yeah,
I
left it. I left it thinking that didn't really come out how I wanted to, and now this time nailed it. Yeah. Can we just put that in there?
Set the record straight.
Nice job.
So you have some iconic episodes of your podcast, and I wanted you to explain a little bit about two. There were two. So there was one you met, you found out about your brother. Actually, just tell us. You know the one I'm getting at.
Yeah. So I grew up not knowing who my dad was. And it wasn't a situation where, it was a one-night stand or an assault or anything like that. In 2019, at the end of 2019, I signed up for 23andMe. I spit in the cup and sent it in, whatever, with the goal of...
This episode brought to you by 23andMe.
With the goal of finding my dad. Because the members of my family were not particularly forthcoming in revealing his identity to me.
Interesting.
So I was like, I'm going to take this into my own hands. And a year and a half later, I go on the 23andMe site. What to give a little bit more of a back explanation, every month they refresh your matches. And in a lot of cases, it's like a 2% match or a 3% match. It's like a third cousin or a fourth cousin or like just some like very remote relative. So I'd stopped looking after a while. I was like, not getting any bites here. And this is, I think, March of 2021. So a year and a half after I've joined, I just randomly go on the site and someone pops up and it's like, oh, this person's a 28% match. And I'm like, that sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
A significant amount of similar DNA going on. Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, this person is your half brother.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, this is weird. And then I look at his picture and I'm like, oh, this is my half brother.
Yeah.
Like me and my brother look alike.
Yeah.
So I reached out via email. He emailed me back within like an hour.
Did he find you too?
Here's the thing. He was looking for me.
Okay.
Like he knew, I didn't know.
About you?
Yeah, I didn't know who he was, but he knew who I was.
Interesting.
So he joined 23andMe looking for me,
Okay.
trying to find me. And we started communicating pretty much right off the bat.
Does he live in the city?
No, he did at one point. We both lived in Brooklyn. He lived in Bay Ridge. I lived in Flatbush.
Oh, shit.
Or he lived in Sunset Park, rather. I lived in Flatbush. And what's really funny is we both have stories of people being like, you know, you look just like this guy I know.
No shit.
Oh, that's
We
wild.
both have stories of
shit.
that. Yeah.
That's fucking
Yeah.
wild.
Which we now assume, obviously, is somebody being like, a friend of mine seeing him and being like, oh, or a friend of his seeing me and being like, oh.
Yeah.
At any rate, we have the same dad.
Right.
And he came up, so my brother came up to visit me for the first time. He lives in Georgia now. Labor Day weekend 2021. And when he went back to Georgia, he was like, so Dad wants to talk to you.
Oh, shit.
Whoa.
And I guess around this time, 3 years ago, I had my first ever conversation with my bio dad.
Wow.
And we met a year later.
Wow.
And we are still in touch. But that first weekend that my brother visited, I was like, let's record a podcast. And he was like, cool, I'm down, let's record.
That's
and
so
we
cool,
did.
man.
Yeah.
So it was literally 24 hours after meeting in person for the very first time.
Whoa.
That is wild.
Yeah.
What a great, what a great podcast
Yeah.
to do. Like that's so fucking cool.
Yeah.
And then switching subjects completely.
Sharp left turn.
You also did an episode at a swingers what, like resort?
It's a resort.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So I am a member of the ethical non-monogamous community. I identify as ethically non-monogamous, consensually non-monogamous, polyamorous, whatever the hell you want to call it. And for a couple of years, I was a host of a podcast called Life on the Swing Set, which is about sort of like, swinging, polyamory, kink, a lot of that kind of stuff. Even though I don't identify with some of those things, I do identify with some of those things. So I ended up becoming a co-host on this podcast, which has been around now for like 15 years, super popular, whatever. They used to do a retreat every year at this resort in Mexico, where they would take the resort over for a week. And it would just be people who are, subscribers to the podcast, fans of the podcast, whatever. And they'd rent this resort out, and it would just be a week in Mexico on this resort, which is called Desire. And it was, I have not been to an all-inclusive as an adult before, but it was just like unlimited food, unlimited alcohol, and you get to fucking run around naked. And people,
so it was a nudist thing,
it was,
too.
Yeah, it was a clothing optional resort. And occasionally you'd walk past people fucking.
And so that was allowed, I guess? I guess you have the whole place.
Yes, it was allowed. It was allowed.
What an appropriately named place, too, by the way. Desire.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well done.
That was intentional.
Yeah.
But at this point, my Detoxicity had been out for about a year and a half. And also, the Swing Set podcast was still happening. Mm-hmm. So on site, we recorded an episode of the Swing Set. And we recorded an episode of Detoxicity where, we just sort of talked about masculinity in a room with a group of people, as opposed to just somebody sitting on my couch or on Zoom one-on-one.
Right.
So it was a group discussion. I feel like it was very impactful. Like people definitely brought their vulnerability to the table in that setting, with that level of comfort.
And this might be too insider baseball, but like, what do you prefer? Do you prefer like a sitting on your couch or a Zoom or a while they're fucking?
I mean, I'm not sure if I want to interview somebody in the middle of having sex.
Oh, come on, man.
I also feel like that would be distracting to the people having sex. Or if it's me, it would certainly be distracting to me.
Sure.
So I'm not sure if I want to do that.
Right.
I actually prefer in person.
Yeah, sure. Same, yeah.
And when
that wasn't a real question. That was just a joke.
When I started the podcast,
I figured you wanted in person. Yes.
Oh, the intention was to have episodes all done in person.
Right.
And then March 2020 came and I was like, oh, well, I guess I can't do all of these in person. So then it became much more heavily Zoom based.
Yeah, you kind of had to unless you just stopped doing it.
Right. We were planning to start ours before we ended up starting ours, and then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then we were just like, let's just wait to be able to do it in person. Like, I was pretty sure we'd eventually be able to be in person again.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, I don't think this is going to last forever, so we'll just wait.
And it's opened. The ability to do it remotely has opened me up to have guests on the show that don't live in New York,
country.
Or across the world that don't even live in the U.S.
Or just in Jersey and don't.
I mean, look, I interviewed Chris Gethard, who I think lives in Jersey. He theoretically could have gotten on the New Jersey Transit path and come over to Brooklyn. But I was like, let's not do that. Also, I think it was 2020 or 2021 when that happened, so wouldn't have been safe.
He was just happy to be on a podcast, probably. At that time.
I think he does lots of podcasts. So I think he's just like, I got to do this one thing. Fuck it. Yeah.
So how did the episode work with the people that were at the resort? Like,
I mean, did
you have a bunch of people on, or how? Okay, cool.
Yeah, it was basically. It was almost like a talk show, right?
Yeah.
Where like you have Oprah going through the audience with the microphone, and people raising their hands to speak.
Okay.
So I was Oprah in this case.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just kind of like walking through with the microphone.
Yeah, that was my first thought is like, how did you mic everyone up?
It was just me walking around with
clip it to their skin.
Yeah, exactly.
A nipple clamp microphone, I guess.
That sounds like it would hurt.
Well, maybe some of them
some people might be into that.
I don't want to, again, we're
not going to kink shame anybody.
Not kink shaming here.
Yeah.
Okay, so where can people find you on the social medias?
I am on Instagram at Detox Pod Guy. I'm also on Instagram at Mike Joseph Coaching. I am a life coach. So if anybody wants to pursue that route, by all means, feel free to reach out.
Cool.
But Detox Pod Guy is the main one.
Go check it out, guys. Great podcast. And thank you, Mike, for being here, man. Really appreciate you coming by.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening and watching, and see you next time. Talking Schmidt is recorded at Burmeister Studios in
Astoria, Queens.
Opening music is by Greg Burmeister. Closing music is by
Greg Burmeister.
Our intern is Jason Travis. If you like what you've heard, please like, follow, and write a review for us wherever you listen to podcasts. If you didn't like it, please keep listening to it, but keep your opinions to yourself. If you really liked it, you can find bonus episodes over on our Talking Schmidt Patreon page. Membership is just $5 per month, and it goes a long way to buy us the equipment and bourbon we need. Thanks in advance, and hope you're doing great.